Hello everyone. In this session we will be discussing about germplasm conservation. Before talking about germplasm conservation, we should know what is germplasm. So germplasm is actually the sum total all genes and their alleles present in a crop and its related species. So it is actually a collection of various strains and related species of the concerned crop species. So we can say germplasm as a live information source for all the genes that is present in the plant under consideration, and this information can be conserved for long periods, and it also can be regenerated whenever it is required in the future. The germplasm conservation, it is the most successful method to conserve the genetic traits of endangered and commercially valuable species of plants. Germplasm conservation can be of two types. They can be either ex situ or in situ. Ex situ is that how we conserve like seeds or genetic repositories. All this can be come under ex situ conservation, and in situ is on site or the site itself where the plant is present. For example, in the farms, on natural parks, bioreserves, etc. So germplasm conservation include breeding lines, cultivated species, commercial varieties, special genetic stocks, land races, wild species, or wild species for direct use, that is crop species, and also for indirect use such as root stocks. So as I told before, there are two types of conservation: in situ conservation and ex situ conservation. In situ conservation is on-site conservation, and that means conservation of the genetic resources in the form of natural population by establishing the biosphere reserves such as national parks, sanctuaries, etc. And also practices like horticulture and floriculture, they also preserves plants in its natural habitat. So preserving the plant species in its natural habitat comes under in situ conservation. While ex situ conservation, it is the offset conservation, and it deals with the conservation of endangered species outside its natural habitat. So we will be discussing in detail about this ex situ conservation. So in detail about ex situ conservation. So in this method, the genetic information of the cultivated and wild plant species is preserved in the form of in vitro cultures and seeds. So this either you can store their seeds and keep them, or you can make cultures of or tissue cultures of these plants and store them. So this type of conservation, they actually create a bank of genes or DNA, seeds and germplasm, and forms a genetic information library for endangered, primitive and commercially valuable species. So this type of conservation also involves cryopreservation and gene transformation techniques for incorporation of disease, pest and stress tolerance traits, and environmental restoration of endangered plant species. So as we discussed, ex situ germplasm conservation can either be done in seed banks or in field collection. So we can only conserve the seeds if the species are propagated from seeds. So it is actually economical to preserve the seeds. So how they preserve the seeds is that they dry the water content up to 5 to 8%, and then it is stored under minus 18 degrees Celsius of lower and low humidity. But not all plants produce fertile seeds, or some seeds remain viable only for a limited duration, and after that they may die. Or some seeds are very heterozygous, and therefore they are not suitable for maintaining true to type genotypes, and in some cases the seeds of certain species deteriorate rapidly, and because seeds will be affected with pests and other pathogens. So in these cases it is not feasible to store seeds, so we have to go for another techniques. So we can again divide the ex situ conservation into in vivo conservation and in vitro conservation. In vivo conservation, it is actually the gene banks in which the genetic resources are preserved by conventional method, like how we conserve the seeds, or we conserve the vegetative propagules. That all comes under in vivo conservation. But in vitro conservation, here the genetic resources are preserved by non-conventional methods such as cell and tissue culture, or we cryopreserve them. There are some other techniques which we will discuss. So that comes under in vitro conservation. So we will go in depth about in vitro conservation. So the in vitro conservation, where we preserve by non-conventional methods, this system is extremely suitable for storage of plant materials because it can be stored on a small scale and under disease-free and conditions, and we can also limit their growth. The germplasm storage in vitro is crucial for the future development and the safety of agriculture. So in vitro conservation has many advantages over this in vivo conservation. In vitro cultures enable the plant species that are in danger of being extinct to be conserved, and the vegetatively propagated plants, they can be stored in a very advanced method without wasting so much space and time. Sterile plants that cannot be reproduced generatively can be maintained in vitro, and in vitro it is possible to efficiently reduce the growth, which increases the number of subcultures necessary. And if a sterile culture is obtained, often with great difficulty, then the subculture in vitro is the only safe way of ensuring that it remains sterile. So in vitro conservation, there are two methods. First one is cryopreservation and the second one is slow growth method. So the cryopreservation is actually preserving the germplasm in the frozen state, so there will be metabolically inactive. So this means that we will store it at very low temperatures. For example, we can store it over carbon dioxide, that is over minus 79 degrees Celsius, or in deep freezers, like minus 80 degrees Celsius or above. In vapor phase nitrogen, that is again very low, minus 150 degrees Celsius. In liquid nitrogen, minus 196 degrees Celsius. And you can actually frozen the plant material and maintain it at the temperature of liquid nitrogen. So in this temperatures, the cells will remain metabolically inactive, but they will be alive. In this slow growth method, these cells or tissues, they are stored under non-freezing condition, and they are not completely made metabolically inactive, but they are maintained in a slow growth level, that is a rate that is less than their optimum growth level. So the growing process, that is reduced to a minimum by limiting some factors like temperature or nutrition medium or hormones. We will limit some growth factors and we will slow their growth. So what will happen is this, by this method, the water in the tissue, that will be maintained in liquid condition. So all the biochemical processes will be delayed. All the cultures in this slow growth, they are static, and therefore they require only shelf space in the suitable environment. Now we will discuss each of the processes. The first method is cryopreservation. So cryopreservation means freezing, that is freeze preservation. So the water present in the cells will be converted into solid states. So we all know water becomes ice at 0 degrees Celsius, but in the case of cellular fluids or organic molecules and all, they need a little bit more freezing, more low freezing point they need because of the freezing point depression. So when we are going to freeze a specimen, we have to think about two things, that is susceptibility or degree of freeze tolerance, that is displayed by the given genotype, and the formation of ice crystals within the cell. Because if ice crystals are found within the cell, then it is a damage to the cell. So we have to think about these two things. First is their freeze tolerance, and then the formation of ice crystals. For cryopreservation, we have to do certain steps. The first one is we have to first raise a sterile tissue culture. Then we have to add cryoprotectants, and we have to do some pre-treatment so that we can prevent this um, ice crystal formation. Then we have to freeze them. After that we have to store. Then if we have to regenerate them, we have to thaw this freezed germplasm, and then you have to, after thawing, you have to check for the survival or viability. Then we have to grow them and regenerate them. So these are the steps in cryopreservation. We will discuss each step. The first step is raising sterile tissue cultures. So what type of cells you have to take? You have to take small, richly cytoplasmic meristematic cells, because they survive better than large and highly vacuolated cells. And cell suspensions are more easy to frozen because they are more successfully frozen. So if you are taking cell suspensions, then they have to be in the late lag phase or exponential phase. You can also take callus tissues, particularly among the tropical species, because these callus tissues are more resistant to freezing damage, and they have been used mostly for this germplasm conservation. And if you are taking callus tissues, you have to take a rapidly growing stage of callus, like shortly after 1 or 2 weeks of transplantation to the medium is best for this cryopreservation. So you need not go to a very old callus tissue. Organized structures like shoot apices, embryos, or young plantlets are the best for cryopreservation. Cultured cells are not that much preferred because they are not the ideal system for cryopreservation. Then plant meristems, they are also quite often used for preservation. Plant meristems, when they are aseptically isolated and incubated for a few days in the growth media before proceeding to the next step. So we have to take the plant meristem and you have to incubate them in the growth media before preserving. Then the water content of cells or tissues for cryopreservation should be very low, because with low freezable water, tissues can withstand extremely low temperatures. So that is all about raising the sterile cultures. The next the next step is the addition of the cryoprotectants and pre-treatment. So if you are taking many crops, especially of the tropics, they belong to the category of recalcitrant seeds. That is, they do not produce the orthodox seeds, so we cannot store their seeds by conventional methods. So in these cases, they cannot be desiccated to low moisture content without the substantial loss of viability. So it is very difficult to conserve them even for short periods at low temperatures. So for preventing that, we have to do some pre-treatment and we have to add some cryoprotectants. So there are many pre-treatment methods. We can do air desiccation freezing. So what happens is that in this technique, the seeds, they are desiccated to different target moisture contents by maintaining overcharged silica gels in desiccants for 4 to 48 hours before we go into freezing. So what we do is we excise the embryos, and embryonic axes are desiccated in sterile air under this laminar airflow cabinet up to 5 hours to around 11 to 16 moisture level. We will first determine their critical moisture content of each, and then we will froze them by plunging into liquid nitrogen. So this is the simplest technique. We don't require more like chemicals like cryoprotectants or expensive programmable freezers and all. So that is air desiccation freezing. So you can either use silica gel. Silica gel is a desiccator, or you can use a laminar airflow cabinet and desiccate them. Next technique is pre-growth desiccation. So in this technique, you will take the explants like zygotic embryos or somatic embryos or shoot apices or embryonic axes, and they are pre-grown on a media containing different cryoprotectants. And why we are doing is that we need to impart greater desiccation tolerance and homogeneity to their behavior. So we will first grow them on a media containing different cryoprotectants. Then the explants are then dehydrated under the laminar airflow cabinet or over the silica gel, or we can also go for encapsulation dehydration or vitrification. Okay, then they are frozen under liquid nitrogen. Okay, so this encapsulation dehydration, what is it? Encapsulation dehydration means the explants will be suspended in about 3 to 5% sodium alginate solution, and then they are picked up and individually they are dispensed into 100 mm CaCl2 solution, and he will shake them. So what will happen is that they will form beads, just like we encapsulate enzymes and we will immobilize enzymes, right? So it is the same process. Okay, so they will form beads within 10 to 20 minutes, and they are then dehydrated in a sucrose enriched media for minimum of 17 hours. Then these beads are later desiccated in the laminar airflow cabinet, and then they are freezed in liquid nitrogen. So that is encapsulation dehydration. Then vitrification. Vitrification is the treatment of tissues with cryoprotectants in the vitrification solution. Then we will do fast freezing. We will rapidly freeze them. The vitrification solution, which is actually called as the most commonly used one, is the plant vitrification solution 2, PVS2, and it contains 30% glycerol, 15% DMSO. DMSO means dimethyl sulfoxide. It is a cryoprotectant, and 15% ethylene glycol. And this procedure was actually developed for short apices, cell suspensions, and somatic embryos, but recently they are also used for zygotic embryos and embryonic access. The next step is the addition of cryoprotectants. So we have to prepare the tissue or cells to withstand the freezing conditions, like we'll go below minus 196 degrees Celsius. So we have to prepare these tissues. So we'll prepare them by adding cryoprotectants. As we discussed before, there are two potential sources of cell damage during freeze preservation. The first one is the formation of ice crystals inside the cells. What will happen if ice crystals form inside the cell? It will lead to rupture of the cell organelles, and also it will lead to the rupture of the cell. Then other damage is that intracellular concentration of solutes, they will increase to toxic levels before or during the freezing as a result of dehydration. So we have to prevent these two conditions. So that is why we are adding cryoprotectants. They will control the appearance of ice crystals in cells, and it will also protect the cells from the toxic solution effect. There are many cryoprotectants available like glycerol, DMSO, glycol acetamide, sucrose, mannose, ribose, etc. But DMSO, sucrose, glycerol, and proline, they are the most frequently used cryoprotectants. So what is actually this cryoprotectants doing? Cryoprotectants will freeze the they will depress the freezing point and supercooling point of water. That is the temperature at which the homogeneous nucleation of ice occurs, and thus retarding the growth of ice crystal formation. So this DMSO, that is the most frequently used and excellent cryoprotectants because of its good properties. DMSO has a very low molecular weight, and it is easily miscible with solvent, and it is non-toxic at low concentration, and it can easily go into cells, and it is also easily washable from the cells. So concentration of 5 to 10% of DMSO or 10 to 20% of glycerol, it's the most used and most adequate for most of the germplasms. So we can also use a mixture of cryoprotectants if that is more beneficial. We can also use that. So how is the whole technique of adding cryoprotectant goes? Actually, the material or this culture, it is suspended in the culture medium, and it is treated with a suitable cryoprotectants, and then it is transferred into a sterile polypropylene cryovials or ampules with a screw cap, and then a dilute solution of the cryoprotectants like 5 to 10% of DMSO or 10 to 20% of glycerol is added gradually or at intervals to these ampules, and So why we are adding gradually means we have to prevent plasmolysis, and it will also protect the cells against osmotic shock. So we have to add gradually we have to add these cryoprotectants. And after the last addition of the cryoprotectant, just before cooling, there should be an interval of 20 to 30 minutes. Okay, before cooling and after the last addition, like you have to give a gap of 20 to 30 minutes, and then the ampules are containing the cryoprotectants are then frozen in liquid nitrogen or other methods.